Do you have a book in you? Welcome to the Fervent 4. Did you know that only 4% of businesses ever cross the annual $1 million revenue mark? Wowzers. Hello, I'm Zach Miller, author of Anomaly. With me today, I have my co-host, Tim Ryan, lead man at startwheel.org and guy who has run for like 10,000 straight days, at least 2 miles every day. Incredible stuff there. Thank you so much for joining us. The Fervent 4 is a weekly show each and every Thursday at 11 a.m., dedicated to sharing insights into growing a world-class business no matter the climate. What's the weather like where you are? Wait, not that kind of climate. What are the keys to writing and publishing a book? That answer and more right now with Don Brotherton of Blue Dragon Publishing. Welcome to the show. Hello.
Good morning.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So that quote behind you is quite fascinating. Is that something that is new?
It is a COVID project made out of scraps. I'm a big time quilter, and this is my favorite things.
When you say scraps, what do you mean by scraps?
So I've done a lot of quilts. My husband will say too many, but I've done a lot of quilts. And every time you make something, you're going to have a little bit of fabric left over. So instead of just throwing those away, I've really gotten into making scrap quilts, which are just put them together, whether the colors work or not. So see what happens. So each one of these books is a different piece of scrap that I had laying around the house. And then I put some book titles, some of my favorite book titles on some of the books. And
what's one of the book titles?
There's my dragon.
Oh, got to have the logo on there. Your favorite things, of course.
My favorite things. The Dragon Riders of Pern is one of my favorite series of all times by Anne McCaffrey. So that made it to one of the book titles. The Holy Bible made it. The Obsession, which was my first book that I ever wrote. So just things like that.
Are they to scale?
No.
There you go.
No.
So that was your COVID project. How's business been with you? Are people taking advantage of their COVID break and writing books?
They absolutely are. As you can imagine, they're home and need to get it out, get the word out. And it's been fun because it's a lot of the people that I'm working with right now are people that want to tell their story for their family. So it's just a legacy project that they would want to pass down. They don't necessarily want it published. They just want to leave a nice product. And that has been so much fun and really interesting to hear about people's backgrounds and how they've coped with things, and people that have grown up during segregation, separate schools. And it's just been fascinating. It's been a lot of fun.
That's interesting. So a lot of people have a book in them, but they don't want anyone else to see it other than like people in their families. Yes,
absolutely. I've done at least 3 like that now.
That's interesting. So what's the meat and potatoes behind that? They just don't care. Did you say a legacy project or something?
Yeah, it's like a memoir. It's just the history of their family, perhaps. Like one lady wrote hers. Her family came over from Italy. So she talked a little bit about that and some of the research that she did and where you could look to find more. And she gave that out when they did a family reunion. She was able to pass that out to all of her siblings, and just something fun to share. And in a nice, neat format that doesn't look sloppy. The stapled together pages.
Interesting. How much research goes into something like that, or is everything already in their mind and it's just a matter of just putting it into paper?
It totally depends on how much they want to do. So the one that I'm working on right now with a gentleman, it's just his stories. But he was in Vietnam. He had 2 tours in Vietnam. So he is telling a lot more stories about day-to-day things. So it's not the big battles and the military strategy. It's day-to-day. This is what happened when I was in Vietnam. And those are the kind of stories that I would have liked to have heard from my grandparents that didn't get passed down. As a matter of fact, this motivated me so much. I called my mother with my recorder on and I go, Mom, talk to me about, what was it like when you grew up in Texas? And what did you learn about this? And so I'm quizzing her now. And I really wish I would have started earlier.
It's interesting that you say that because, as I think about that, Vietnam was many decades ago. And so for this guy to remember this type of stuff, I would anticipate that he has to document a lot, or he had documented a lot of the the process, or at least I would hope to make it easier for him to try and recall some of that stuff. But something that I started doing many years ago is just documenting the process of stuff. And so, I have notebooks of stuff. Here's like a little notebook that I'm doing for the month of November. I'm running 1 mile a day just to see how fast I can go. And like, there's like literally just like little notes about each little run. And so something as simple as that, when you look back at it, I don't think there's a book in this or something like that, but I at least have some sort of documentation I can look back and say, oh, that's what I was thinking that day. And so is that something from the documentation standpoint that you recommend for people to just do more of?
Absolutely. And he's including a lot of pictures as well. Pictures of his family when he was little, during Vietnam, some of those pictures. And the interesting thing is, he'll say me and my brother or something like that. And I'm like, no, you need to think about the long term. I need you to give your name, and what date approximately, if you don't know for sure. When was this taken? Where was this taken? The picture has to almost be able to stand alone, because someday this might turn into a research document.
That's really fascinating. I would think that that a lot of people would think, no, I'm never going to write a book because my story is not that interesting. So that that's maybe that's not the case.
It's interesting to somebody, and it's probably interesting to your family.
Yeah.
Might not be worth publishing and selling to the big mass market, but that doesn't mean nobody will care.
A memoir by Tim Ryan, a book about running a lot.
No, I mean, because that's really fascinating to me. And that's a whole different side of authorship that I never even thought about, passing on your legacy.
If a lot of books are, real quick, so if a lot of books are written every year, I mean, how many books do you think are quote unquote written, published every year?
Oh, millions.
Yeah. So if millions of that, what do you think percentage of them are this style of book that really isn't getting pushed out to like the general public?
Well, because a small percentage.
Yeah.
Because these are typically self-published books, or not really, I don't want to say not really published, but not with an ISBN, not with an international standard book number, therefore not counted. And some of the places that do the counting of all these things to track the statistics only count ones that are for sale. So for this gentleman's book, we're going to do 50. So I'm going to go to a printer and I'm going to print 50 copies and he's going to have them.
So are there, I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying, I'm not putting them out on Amazon.
So that leads me to believe that there are different types of publishing that is available to choose from. There isn't just a one size fits all.
Yes, absolutely. So basically, since the rise of computers in the digital age, there are 4 different ways that you can publish, and they're all perfectly fine. It just depends on your needs. So there's vanity press, which I would say you should avoid at all costs. Those are the people that take a lot of your money, but really do nothing for you but print. It'd be much cheaper to just go to Kinko's. So, and they prey on people that are in a hurry. They prey on older people that don't like to work with computers. So I would avoid vanity press. Then there's traditional publishing, which is at the far extreme. And that's get an agent, go to New York City, and the author makes about 8 or 9% of the royalties, and that they have to split with their agent. So those are the 2 extremes. A step up from vanity press is self-publishing, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with self-publishing as long as you treat it as business. You pay for an editor, you get a real cover, you do the formatting correctly, you treat it as a business. The people that knock out their book on Friday night and post it on Amazon Saturday morning and say, I'm a published author, really give everybody else a bad name. So people really need to treat this like it's going to be out there forever. And then between self-publishing and traditional publishing is something called hybrid press. And hybrid is like outsourcing all the things you don't want to do. It's self-publishing where you have more control, but you're paying somebody else to do the editing, do the marketing, find the cover artist or illustrator if you're doing a children's book. So you're paying somebody else to do those things. In exchange, the author must make at least 60% of the royalties minimum for them to be truly considered a hybrid press and not a vanity. The other thing about hybrid is they won't take just anybody because they still have their stamp, their publisher's name on that book. So it still has to be a book of quality. It's not, the vanity press will take anybody. Hybrid press, you have to submit your work and they will decide whether or not they want to publish it.
Interesting. And something about self-publishing that's great now is kind of what you said, where if you're going to market the thing yourself, you might as well just probably do it yourself too, because then you get to keep a higher majority of the royalty, if you will.
And every single every single publishing option you have, the author is going to be expected to do some marketing.
Sure. And I think the draw is what people would get in the beginning. Maybe they get a draw or something like that, a royalty. What's the thing up front?
Advance.
An advance, right? And so that advance is typically something that people don't think about. Is that advance is typically used to pay for the marketing.
Right. And an advance is just that. It's an advance on your royalties.
Right.
So if your book doesn't take off, you may never see another penny.
I wonder, I guess would you have to pay that back in many cases too?
No, you don't have to pay. Typically you don't, unless it's in your contract, weird, but no, typically you don't pay back in advance. But like I said, you might, if your book doesn't take off, you're not going to get anything else. And I shouldn't say most, many traditional publishing companies are not paying advances anymore. They just don't have the money to do it.
Yeah, I think I heard somewhere that Michelle Obama's book, Becoming, is that what it was called?
Yes.
She got a $65 million advance.
Oh my gosh. It was a fantastic book, though.
There you go. I listened to books. I listened to about 2 hours of it and I just couldn't get into it. I'm sure it was great. Maybe I'll give it another shot, but I don't know. Yeah, I just wasn't into it that day. Just I was on a run or something. I guess I was having a bad day and I was like, I can't get into this.
You know how the story ends.
Yeah, exactly.
But I like Michelle Obama, and I think, to think about, she was #1 on Amazon for a long time, and it was her and David Goggins going back and forth, 1 and 2 during that whole thing last, I don't know, December. Well, I guess 2 Decembers ago. I mean, it's just incredible to see someone be #1 for as long as they are, and it's just. And to get $65 million advance, that's not the largest advance ever. I think there's a Stephen King book or something like that got like $100 million, which is still ridiculous in itself. Hey, write this book, get $100 million. Like,
wow.
I'm like, oh, do I have to? Okay.
Yeah, sure. That's great. But that's cool. So you said a lot of people are writing books during COVID. That's great news. That means people aren't wasting their time. So how do you, when you learn that someone is potentially writing a book, what do you do to kind of insert Blue Dragon into the situation so that you can help them get it out and so people can read their work?
Well, everybody has a different reason for wanting to publish. Like I said before, some people just want to do the memoir for their family, but they might want to do it because they have a business and they want to show that they're an expert in their field. If they do a lot of talks like this one and they want to have a book to sell in the back of the room, like I have The Road to Publishing, then they might not want to go with a traditional publisher because they'll make more money either self-publishing or doing the hybrid publishing thing rather than going big, because then they're keeping more of the money for themselves. So everybody has a different reason, and they'll reach out to me. Usually they'll find me on, well, not so much on Facebook, although I do have an account out there, but I have a lot of people finding me just through Google and through word of mouth. Word of mouth, I get a lot of clients that just want some information. They don't know where to start, which is why The Road to Publishing is great, because it kind of walks you through the pros and cons of each one of those 4 different publishing types that I told you about, and helps them think about which one makes most sense. And then I do a free chat with them over the phone or over Zoom, whatever they're more comfortable with, and kind of get a feel of where they are. I will look at a sample of their material for free and tell them, hey, you might want to go back and work on this, this, and this, and then come back to me. Or, hey, you're ready to move forward, and I help them with their goals. So Blue Dragon used to be a hybrid press, but since COVID, I have switched over and I am doing more publishing services, which basically means a la carte, doing exactly what you need me to do and nothing more.
If someone was to ghostwrite a book they're still writing it in some capacity, maybe not physically typing it or writing it, but they're still getting those words out in that kind of stuff, right? So like someone can't just go and start writing about them without having any kind of documentation, right?
No, I think you can. I mean, people write books about Michelle Obama, and can do that without
That's fair.
permission. So it's a more solid book if they have a connection and they've done research and proven the research. Ghostwriting is tough because ghostwriting, and I'm telling you, you pay a lot of money for ghostwriters.
Sure.
Ghostwriting is having somebody else write the story, but from your point of view. So you're saying, this is me, this is really mine. And that's how all the big people do it. They probably don't type it out themselves. They pay somebody else to do it for
them. I think you know who my editor for Anomaly was, Chris Jones of chrisjonesinc.com. And that was something that was really important for me is like, is this going to stay in my voice? Because I'm weird, right? And I say weird things, and it's just like, if this is going to get to like, if this is going to be lame, then I don't want this, right? I want this to be very like,
it's got to be you.
Yeah. And so there was a couple of times I remember from the publisher and Chris that like we had some debates, and there was something like with like Planet Fitness, and they didn't like what I called it or something like that, where I used Planet Fitness, which is like the $10 a month gym. And I said, it's like a non-bro gym, right? Because all these other gyms are like, and like loud and stuff like that. And I don't think they liked that term. And I was like, well, I don't care. That's what I want to call it. I feel like that's what they market to. Like it's a non-bro gym. And so we kept it. I think. I don't know.
You don't go back and read your book after it publishes, do you?
Well, I've voiced it twice, and I've read it. No, I haven't read it again. So no, I haven't. Hey, we got a question from Joel Ankney of Joel Ankney Law Firm, who was a previous guest. He says, how important are reviews on Amazon for self-published books, and how can a self-published author legitimately obtain more reviews?
Reviews are extremely important, and it's a marketing thing is what it comes down to. Getting the reviews, having the reviews is great marketing, but just getting them. So Joel, right after you sell a book, for example, if you have Square, I use Square when I do my book signings, you can set up through their marketing that 30 days after they buy your book, it sends them the link that says, hey, if you enjoyed my book, please review on Amazon or whatever, and you give them the link. What you want to do is make it as easy for them as possible. Another thing you could do is, I know it sounds counterproductive, but give away free books. Amazon rules are very specific, and you cannot pay anybody to review your book. So you can't say, hey, I'll give you a free book if you'll do a review for me. But you can say, I'm giving you a free book. I would love a review. You know what I mean?
It even says like verified purchased at some place on there too, which is interesting. Another thing that I was thinking about, so like in the back of the room type of book selling thing, let's say 100 people in a room. Not everyone in that room is potentially buying a book. Maybe you were good at the sales process beforehand and you got the organizer to buy a book for everyone. But even then, most of the time, you don't have the contact information of everyone there. Not everyone is ready, wallet out and stuff like that. So after doing a couple of these, I realized, there's a lot more people in this room who weren't buying my book, but I think I can convince them to buy my book or my kind of consulting coaching services later on how to grow their business, how to market their business. Maybe there's something else there. So I came up with literally just a form that I would pass out in the thing and say, hey, like if you're interested in receiving my newsletter every Monday at 10:15 a.m., give me your name, your email, and then I Zackified it and said, hey, I just met you and this is crazy, but what's your number so I can call you maybe, like the great Carly Rae Jepsen song. It works. People love to give me their cell phones, and I think it's hilarious. And then I call them like 3 days later, and they're like, I didn't expect you to call me. I'm like, well, I didn't expect you to give me your number, so thanks. But like, it is hard though, right? And so reviews on Amazon, I think I have like 23 or 24 reviews. Thousands of copies have been bought, given out, whatever throughout. I mean, that's a very small percentage. It's hard to get reviews. What do you think about the difference between like an Amazon or like a Goodreads? Do you think one is better than the other? Where do you feel on that?
And this would totally be a personal preference. This is not based in anything solid, but I would say Amazon, because more people have Amazon accounts than they do have Goodreads accounts. I've been playing on Goodreads, and it's funny because Amazon owns Goodreads. So you would think, can't you just pass it down? Yes. So you would think, can't you guys just exchange? But they don't. I've been playing with Goodreads lately to try to up my Goodreads accounts, but there are so many different programs and things that you have to put your fingers in and try to play with keywords. And
Tim, are you familiar with Goodreads?
I've never even heard of it.
Yeah, so it's basically literally just a book review site.
Yeah.
And sometimes they have some interesting features in there that I guess if you're really popular, you're able to use, just like anything else, where like if you have 10,000 subscribers on Instagram or like YouTube or something like that, you get more features. And so there's some interesting stuff that will get distributed out that can be more difficult. But, to me, like the answer is, Donna, like I would agree Amazon is better, right? But also like go where your people are, right? And so if people are more, I feel like if you're on Goodreads, you're more of a book reader. So that's a more niche-y type of thing, right? Which Amazon is not. I mean, I can buy whatever on Amazon, but more people. Is Amazon the #1 site in the world, Tim?
In terms of web traffic?
Yeah, it's got to be, right?
Google is still #1.
Okay.
But Amazon started as a bookstore.
Right. But people forget about that.
That is true. Dawn, I have a question. You brought up a word that I want to touch on, and that was goals. I would think that writing a book is probably very similar to running. We've mentioned running a couple of times. People will watch something, they may listen to this show and be like, wow, Dawn, you really motivated me to write a book. And so just like with running, I'm motivated. I'm going to run a 5K. They go out, they run 2 miles. And they're like, you know what? The next morning, they're not super motivated to continue going. One, do you experience that a lot? And two, what do you give aspiring authors in terms of goals to keep the momentum so that they finish what they once started?
And I'm so laughing at you because I am not a runner at all. I don't think you could set any goals that would make me run. The military did it for me. That was long, I only did it when I was in the military. So most people don't, where do I want to start this? Fiction books have to be totally finished before they can be pitched to a traditional publisher. Nonfiction books, you can pitch a book synopsis. So you can just give them a summary and try to sell them on an idea before you write the book. So you're at two different places. One of the things that I've started doing is publishing coaching, basically. People that want to get published and they know, like you said, Tim, I know I want to do this. I have an idea. It's going to be great, but I need somebody to help me. And what I help them with is setting deadlines and holding them accountable. I am pretty good at the setting checklist and follow it through. And so I give them a little bit of homework at a time because, Zach, as you know, it's kind of overwhelming to go, yeah, you want to write a book? Do all these things. And it just gets dumped on you and it just feels like it's too much. And that's why people give up. So what I do is I give them a little bit at a time. Just talk to me about where you want to be.
Is that
right now, let's talk about audience.
Like 500 words a day, a week? What would you break that down to?
Well, at first it's setting of the goals. So it's a lot of the beginning. And then I weave in the marketing, believe it or not, I weave that in because like your audience, who's your audience? Where are you going to try to sell this book? Because that will make a difference down the road. And I want them thinking about it up front. Don't want them to wait until the very end and then go, yeah, I wrote this great book, but I've got no place to sell it.
Well, that's what's interesting on that. And I'm going to piggyback what you're saying is writing the book, as ridiculous as this seems, is actually pretty easy, I think. It's the putting together all that other stuff beforehand that is the more difficult part. And so it's hard figuring out, okay, what is the outline of this book going to be? The table of contents, right? Who who is going to read this, because you're probably going to speak to that person throughout the book. And so you want to know that. And then something I like to do is like have a little bit of notes per chapter, per sub chapter of each thing, to then say, okay, this is what this is about. Because if you can't do that, when you go to actually type it out, the 500 a day, if you will, and we're in NaNoWriMo month anyway, which is the National Novel Writing Month, which is like write a book in a month. If you don't know what you're going to write on that day, I tend to believe it's very difficult to get anything out on that day. And so that's why I think you need to have notes on what that specific chapter is. I think actually writing the book is fairly easy. It's getting all that other subset done beforehand.
Exactly what you're talking about specifically is a book synopsis. That's what it is. And that happens a lot with nonfiction, but not so much with fiction.
Sure. Well, I'm not into the fiction side. Right.
Yeah. For me, in the books that I've written, my characters take my story and they go wherever they want with it. So I start out one way and I think this is the person who did it, but then something happens and, oh my God, where did that come from? Oh, now I have to figure this out, because my characters come alive, especially within the dialogue, and things shift. So Tim, going back to your question, what we do as we step through this is I'll have them send me just one chapter, and then I'll give them feedback on that one chapter. Key things that they might be repeating. Certain words tend to be repeated when people talk, like so. So is a connector that people use all the time that needs to come out of your writing. Just that. Some of these words are used a lot. So if I pick up on those things and I can tweak it right from the beginning, as the person keeps writing, they will keep improving their writing. And like I said, fiction versus nonfiction is very different, because you got to look at for fiction, you have to look at character arcs, surprises, being realistic. Even if it's science fiction or fantasy, it still has to be believable, if that makes any sense. You can't just poof, have somebody show up, because nobody's going to go for that. So little things like that. So we'll do like a chapter at a time, and we'll tweak and we'll discuss. They give me another chapter. And then once they're on the road, then we would go to a word count or whatever. And I try to take into consideration what else is going on in their lives. It might be too hard for you to get a chapter out a week when you have young kids at home that you're trying to homeschool. But every 2 weeks, you might be able to do it. And I say chapter because it's it's very random, because word count makes all the difference in the world. A chapter can be really long or it can be very short. So we kind of tweak it as we go along. And so everybody that I coach, they have their own coaching plan, and I write it specifically for them. And we set goals together that make sense for their lifestyle.
Interesting. What the other thing I'm curious about is the whole Audible audio version. How does that work? Or do some people, can you skip the whole typing and print copy and just go straight to an Audible book? How does that work?
You cannot skip that. The writing is very important, especially Audible, because Audible, they check it. Audible's owned by Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
And it has to match word for word with your ebook, with whatever ebook you have out there. And they double check it. So even once you turn it in, my first book, The Obsession, which is a murder mystery, it came out on Audible. But it took them probably 6 weeks for them to check it, to make sure that the audiobook met exactly with the ebook. So Audible's only one option. There's other companies out there. There's another one called Findaway Voices that will put out to a lot more audiences rather than just the Amazon Audible stuff. I'm not going to say which one is better than the other. I am fairly new to the audio version. Everything I do, I always experiment on myself first. Like if I'm going to try out a new printer, or if I'm going to try out a new marketing technique or anything, I always experiment with my books. And I have 9 books out there right now. And so using Audible was an experiment with me for The Obsession. And I'm trying that. And I'm working on the second book in that series, Wind the Clock. and I'm working on the script for that, so it can go out on Audible. But then the next book that I do, I'm probably going to do on Find Away Voices, just to see if it makes a difference. And I don't know, I'm playing with the idea. So I've hired an actor to read my other two books, and she's going to read both of them, which is nice. But for the road to publishing, I'm toying with the idea of reading it myself, because being nonfiction, you get the author's voice more, and I don't know, it feels more personal.
Yeah, I definitely felt like that was important for me when I did it. So Audible does allow you to be off a little bit, but that's the difference between abridged and unabridged. Is that?
I don't know.
Okay.
That would make sense. Yes, that would make sense, because
I think mine was a little off
shorten it.
script, and they told me I had to be like within 3%.
Okay, there you go.
I think is what they said, and I probably went on some tangents that were a little out there. One thing that I thought was interesting, though, with Audible, at least when I signed with them, is they forced me to sign. They didn't force. I had to do like a 7-year exclusivity, or I could do non-exclusivity, get less money. But then what's interesting out of that is now there's a lot more options out there, right? And so even from a free perspective, where people don't think about this, is your library card a lot of times will get you a free audiobook. And if you're using an audiobook or a book in general to gain new clients, you probably don't care as much about making the $2 to $10 per book. You care to get that in front of as many people as possible, so then they'll pick up the phone and call you and give you thousands of dollars in your service package or something like that. And so it's interesting, lessons learned with that. I probably would not have signed an exclusivity with Amazon had I thought about that or not at that point.
And that's the same thing about that's the same thing about writing a book to sell in the back of the room. Same exact reason. If you're using it as marketing, you don't need to go with the traditional where they're going to give you 8% and you're the one selling the book.
Yeah. You're doing it because you want this thing right here, or your book, to get you more out of it. Right. And so it's like, I get it. Yep. Totally agree with that. So you've written 9 books. Which one took is that right? 9 books?
Yep.
9 books for yourself. Which one took the longest to write, and why do you think that is?
Always the first one. The first one always takes the longest, I think. Just to get started, you don't know where you're going. You don't have your habits down. And my first one, I was in the Air Force for 28 years. And during my first duty assignment, I had a stalker. I had somebody breaking into my house, messing with my phones. Very creepy. Not creepy enough, so I had to kill off a few people. And then I turned that into my first book, The Obsession. And that whole process probably took 4 years, because I wrote all the real stuff first. I wrote all the stalker parts, and then I set it aside, and I came back and I'd look at it and I go, it didn't have enough punch. It sucked. It sucked to have a stalker, but it didn't have enough punch to sell. So that's when I went back and I added in, interspersed in the chapters, the murder parts. At a book signing this Saturday, I was telling somebody that story, and they go, "Wait a minute, you murdered people?" And I'm like, "No, it's in the book. It's in the book. It's not real." Anyway, and then I thought I was done, because you usually start with what you know.
Right.
And people kept asking me, though, for more Jackie, who's the main character. And they wanted to know, well, what happened after the end of the book? I'm not going to tell you what happened. And I said, I don't know. I wrote my story. And then one day I got mad at my husband, so I killed him in the second book. Don't tell him that part, though. He hasn't read it. Don't tell him.
What a cliffhanger.
Exactly. So in Wind the Clock, Jackie goes off to Germany. She's working for the Inspector General's office. And while she's there, there's a plane crash. It looks very similar to a scenario she wrote for an exercise. So she gets blamed for it and has to figure out who did it to get OSI off her case.
Oh, wow.
So
are you Jackie?
Jackie is the main character. So yes, it was based on my stalker experience.
Well, hello, Jackie.
And I am working on the third one, where she's up at the Pentagon and she's working for the Sexual Assault Prevention Response Office.
You may know him as Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. I know him as just
a man who has done incredible things for the last few decades. But how can you use his techniques in your business? I'll show you exactly how. Head on over to ZachMillerSays.com/The Rack, and you can smell what he's cooking.
Nice.
Always a treat, Zach.
It's different. Look, I wrote a book called Anomaly. I have to do things that are different. Like a poster of The Rock. Like, it's interesting.
Okay.
You have your quilt. I have my rock. Tim
Right.
has his whiteboard with nothing on it. I mean, it's perfect. He has medals to the side of it, but we can't really see those.
Right. So, Don, a question that I have is, it sounds like you will publish any type of book. Someone who's looking for a publisher, is that something that they need to consider, or should they look for someone who just focuses on fiction or nonfiction or this particular subject? Is there any importance in that at all?
Okay. So first of all, I'm going to clarify.
Okay.
I won't publish anybody's book. So Blue Dragon Publishing, like I said, I was a hybrid, which meant you still had to be accepted. It had to be a decent work. And then there were a few caveats that I refused to publish. But right now I'm doing publishing services. So I will help almost anybody. And I say almost, because if it comes to me and it's going to, it needs a lot of work, I'm going to tell you, this is going to cost you too much money. You need to go back and work on it some more and then come back to me. And I actually have a little checklist that I tell them, go through and look for these things. It'll save you tons of money in the long run. But then to get back to your point, when it is time, and this is something else that I coach people through with this Blue Dragon Publishing services, is if you decide you want to pitch to a traditional, that means you need to get an agent. So agents specialize. They specialize by genre. And they might do children's book, middle grade, and young adult, and then they might do nonfiction on certain topics. So you definitely need to find the right agent, and I kind of help you through that process. There's a great website out there, and it's mentioned in my book, so you can find it there. But it's called querytracker.net, and you can go out there and it's free, or you can pay for the upgraded version for $25 a year. No, I don't get any kickbacks for that, but it is a really good website, and it'll help you locate agents that handle your specific genre. So I will help people through that process. I'll help them figure out the query letter. I help them with their pitch, which is a one-liner of here's what my story's about, and here's why I'm the best person to write the book, those kind of things. Because then the agent will only pitch the book to the publishers that make sense for them. So if you're writing a Christian romance story, the agent is going to pitch that book to the Christian publishers. They have their contacts, which is why they specialize in certain genres.
Do you think, or what do you think is one of the largest, the biggest, the most ridiculous marketing claim that people make when writing a book, or something that they struggle with from a marketing perspective when throughout the entire book writing or promotion perspective of their book?
I'm not sure I exactly understand the question.
What do people suck at when it comes to marketing their book? I clearly was not able to articulate that because I suck at marketing myself. So when someone has a book out there, what do you see as like the number one marketing mistake that people continue to make over and over and over again?
One of the big mistakes that I made, marketing costs money. So first of all, there's a difference between publicity and marketing. Marketing is what you want people, you get to say what you want to say about your book or your business or whatever. Publicity is what other people say about you. So review is publicity. This is really publicity because you're asking me questions and, we're kind of going off on tangents. But marketing is like your Facebook page, sending out letters, sending out postcards, whatever. One of the things that I did early on was I trickled my money. I tried a little bit of this, a little bit of this, a little bit of this, where if I had put that same amount of money, but done a full scale push, I probably would have done better overall. And that's what I was talking about, how I always experiment with myself first. So these are some of the lessons that I've learned over the years is, no, when we do a book launch, we're going to go all in and we're going to hit these different venues all at the same time to try to work them together. It's funny, many authors sit behind the computer, quiet people. I had a person come up to me at a book signing and say, "Oh, I don't want to do any of this stuff." And
Any
I
of
said,
the marketing?
I'm sorry?
Any of the marketing?
Yeah, well, he meant like talking to people because we were at the book festival. And I said, then you're not going to make any money because you have to talk to people. And I have some authors, I have over 30 authors that actually published with Blue Dragon when I was still a hybrid. And one of my authors is extremely shy, but I take her along to the book signings and I kind of practice with her and we work it together and we work on the pitch and I'll like warm up the person and get them to the tent and then pass them over to Amy and let her talk. So you really have to get used to it and you have to sell yourself. You have to be confident enough in your story. But I'm also confident enough that when I'm talking to people and they say, well, I really like historical fiction. And I'll say, I don't have any of that. But have you tried this book? And it might not be mine, but giving value added wherever you can. And when kids come to my books, to my booth, I have a series of middle grade, which is really not middle school. And I wish they wouldn't do that. Middle grade is like 1st through 5th grade. And I have a set called the Lady Tigers. And the Lady Tigers is about a girls' fast pitch softball team where the girls learn that being part of a team is more than what happens on the field. So it has girls on the cover. When boys come to my booth and they're looking for books, they typically are not going to pick up the Lady Tigers because it has a girl. I understand that. I don't mind that. Culturally, I kind of mind it a little bit, but I understand it. So if they come to my table and they're looking, I can say, I don't really have anything, but have you tried, the Boxcar Children or any of those other books? Matt Christopher was my absolute favorite. That's what got me started on the kids' books because he wrote every book you can imagine on every sport you can imagine, but it always had boys on the covers. And I hated that. And I'm talking like 50 books, all for boys, which is why I started the Lady Tigers. I wanted something with girls on the cover that was not gymnastics or dance. So daughters helped me with that.
One thing you mentioned, another word that triggered something. It was they have to be comfortable with their story, and I would think that the author's backstory is something that's really important. That's part of their pitch. You need to have something that's going to make them want to buy that book, other than, well, not to be super cheesy, but you can't judge a book by its cover. So how do you, any tips or tricks that you can share with folks in terms of how to draw out that backstory about that person to make them stand out, make them more likable?
I don't know if I can make them more likable, but yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things that we work on when we do coaching too, because if you're going to pitch to an agent, they definitely are going to know your backstory, need to know it, need to know how you present yourself. And even when I talk to people one-on-one and I'm trying to sell my Lady Tiger books, for example, I can say I started playing fast pitch when I was 9 years old. And then I played travel ball and I was an umpire and I was a softball coach. So I've done all these things. So right there, people are interested because they think, oh, well, she knows what she's talking about. Same thing with the obsession. When I tell people that is my stalker story, that's usually enough for it to sell. So I do try to connect it have the authors make the connection of why they wrote the book. If you're writing nonfiction, you absolutely have to have here's why I'm the most important person to write this book. Here's why I'm the best at this topic. So yes, working on that, it is part of their pitch when they present to an agent. So we really try to draw that out.
From a business perspective, why would you recommend someone to write a book?
Whether it's true or not, if you are a published author, you are considered an expert in your field. So again, you're selling it in the back of the room. That's great, but it's also marketing. It's getting your word out, and something that is in print that people can go back and they can reference really makes them feel better that you know what you're talking about.
Yeah, the word author is a derivative of the word authority. And I think something that's interesting is as more books become electronically read or listened to, do you think that that's something that has leaned one way or the other, or do you think it's still kind of a very factual statement from an expert standpoint?
Yeah, I totally think it's still a factual statement.
Yeah.
Because look at this. I mean, the podcast and everything, it's just an extension of an audiobook. It's a different way to do it.
It is fascinating in the sense of we'd have to go back and count, Zach, but the number of guests that we've had. I think this is episode 29 or
47,
or something like that. What is it?
I don't know.
Okay, but the number of people that we've had on this show that have published a book.
Well, every episode has had a published author on it.
It's crazy. And
that's just because I've always been on it.
Well, but yeah, but beyond that, in terms of guests,
yeah, probably 20%, maybe.
Yeah, we'll have to do the math, but it is amazing how many people
it makes a difference
have published.
But it is very interesting, like when you sit there and like you think about it, like author authority. It's very interesting. I've done a lot of things, not to like toot my own horn, but like this is like I've done a lot of things in the business world that have gotten a ton of notoriety. But it was so interesting to me that when I got Anomaly out, how many more doors opened that I didn't realize weren't opened yet. And so it was very interesting how something like this even opened doors for people who didn't think doors needed to be open. And so that I think that's a very powerful piece to having a book out there. And I think that people, it's been 6 or 7, 8 months now since, the middle of March and COVID and stuff like that. Like you've had plenty of time to write it. If you haven't yet, you need to start working on it like right now. Like get it out. It's not as hard as you think. If Tim can run for 2,000 straight days, y'all can write for 30 straight days to get a book out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you can find me and I can help you through the process. And I'm listed as a resource on startwill.org. So if people are looking for help.
There you go. You can either go to the resource page at startwill.org or go to bluedragonpublishing.com.
Yep.
The Fervent 4 is powered by the Small Business Development Center, which helps local small businesses grow through counseling. If you're interested in learning more on how the SBDC can help your business, head to startwheel.org/weekly.
So you wanted to be a softball coach at some point in your life?
I did. I ended up being a softball coach. But when I was younger, I wanted to be a high school softball coach. That's what I wanted to do when I grew up. So our softball coach was a guidance counselor at our school. So I decided I needed to be a guidance counselor in order to be a softball coach. So I got my degree in psychology, and I actually got my master's in counseling and psychology. But I went into the Air Force instead and stayed there 28 years. When I was getting ready to retire and I was looking for other jobs, I went into the high school and I walked in to go meet with the counselor just to see what it was like. And just being back in the school kind of made me decide I did not want to be a guidance counselor after all. I ended up volunteering. I used to coach for the Williamsburg Stars, which was a travel team here in Williamsburg. And I coached for the Brotherton high school team, the varsity team. I was an assistant coach there for a while as a volunteer. But I've got it out of my system.
That was enough. Got it.
What was
now I just want to write about it.
What was easier to coach? Aspiring authors or a girls softball team? Oh,
give me the authors any day.
Oh, really?
But I tell you what, and there's a big difference too. Coaching the Stars, was a travel team. So those are girls that really, really wanted to be there, and their parents paid money for them to be there, so they were in it. And the high school teams, they're not. They're just to do something. And so it was a very different coaching dynamic. I did coach when I was a second lieutenant stationed at Whiteman Air Force Base. That was my first coaching. So I was 24, maybe 23, 24. And I remember my colonel, so my like 4 layers up from me, his daughter was on my team. And that was a little bit challenging, although he was awesome about it. He never gave me a hard time, even when I benched his daughter. But he never gave me a hard time. I did make her cry once.
I coached a summer swim team for 5 years as a head coach, and the kids were always great. I always said, though, the parents, it was 150 kids usually on average. And so people look at 150 kids. Yep. Well, it's 300 adults, 300 parents. And there is a handful, multiple handfuls of those people that were just, what's the word? PETA?
Yes.
Yeah. Pain in the tail. Yeah. Or just pit with the 2 T's. Yeah. I mean, it's hard, but it's very, I loved coaching, and it's something that is always in the back of my mind of like, oh, that would be fun to do again. I say that, but I was like 20 then, so it was fun then. Who knows if it would be fun now? Tim, did you ever coach any of your kids' sports?
No, not even no. Especially with our kids, it's just it's better to let someone else coach them.
Well, that's always the case anyway. And we would make that deal because we also coached like T-ball, and when they were really little. I have 2 daughters. They're now 18 and 20. But we coached their teams, and we would make a deal with the other coaches. You coach my kid, I'll coach your kid, and let's not say anything to our own. And that always seemed to work better.
That's cool.
But I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, please.
I was going to say, but Paige, my now 18-year-old, did write one of the books in the Lady Tiger series. She wrote the 4th book because it had to do with self-esteem. And she felt she was much closer to that issue than I was. So she did a fantastic job. She wrote it in my voice. I'm talking about that, Zach, very important, because then it fit into the whole series. But I did not edit her book. I did not coach her through that. I mean, we talked about it, but when it came time, we sent it to a different editor, and they talked to her, they gave her the feedback, and they took care of everything because I didn't want mom to get in the way of that.
Well, she definitely knew your voice.
I'm sorry?
She definitely knew your voice.
Yeah, she did. But she was fantastic because before she wrote that book, she had been a beta reader. She read all my books, and she helped me write the back blurb. On my website, there's a section called Meet the Lady Tigers, and there are softball cards for each one of the 13 girls on my team. And Paige wrote all of those. I had somebody else draw it, but she wrote all the, their favorite ice cream is this, and they've got brothers and sisters, and the whole backstory for each one of my characters. Paige wrote all of it. So she was ready to do this.
No, I'm hungry.
But now she is 18 and in college, and she is writing her own stories, though, in her own voice, and they're going to be more fantasy kind of books for young adult, probably.
Cool.
But she's just doing that for fun, not for a degree.
What do you think is the number one fear or obstacle that people have that they have to overcome before to take the plunge?
That people aren't going to like their book. Your book is your baby. You've been working on this so long, and it's hard to hear anything negative about your book. But what people have to realize is you're not going to please everybody. It's not everybody's taste to read middle grade softball books. So some people are not going to like it. Some people are absolutely going to love it. And you just have to take the good with the bad. I have listened to a lot of different interviews with big authors, and they say they don't even read the reviews because they don't want to know. They don't want to know what people are saying. You have to have a really good relationship with your editor. And another thing I recommend when you're getting to that point and it's time to go for editing, and everybody has to have an editor. You cannot edit your own book. I don't edit my own books. I send it out to somebody else, and somebody else edits my book. Because if you're not trained, and I am trained, but my brain will fill in the holes that are missing.
That's right. You read what you think it's there, and so yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely. So when you get an editor, you have to make sure that your personalities are good and that they work together, because it's a long road to get through. And if the editor is beating you up all the time, or you feel like the editor is beating you up, that's not a good relationship to be in. You have to be where they are honest with you so that you're going to produce the best book that you can, but they've got the right touch for your personality.
Yeah, I always think I tell people like, oh, you wrote this? I'm like, the first draft. That's my response. And then a bunch of other people touched it. And those people touched it and made it better, right? So it's definitely my thoughts, but then a bunch of other people who are smarter than me in that specific thing made it a stronger piece of work. And so I think that's powerful. So do you have advice for people that are too afraid about their baby getting out there? Like, is there something that they can do, or they just got to suck it up and deal with it?
In the end, they're going to have to suck it up and deal with it if they want it published. But
I mean, that's what I would say. Like,
a great way to start is with a writer's group, getting with people that you trust. And I always recommend that you're in a writer's group. It's where you can share in progress. You can send out share a chapter. Like, everybody has one chapter that they have written in whatever genre they're writing. And then they give honest feedback. You have to give honest feedback or it's totally useless. And then you tweak and tweak. And sometimes, so I'm in a writer's group as well. And in my group of 6 or 7 people, 3 people might say this and 2 people might say just the opposite. Well, I need to go with, pick and choose what I agree with and what I don't agree with, and then run with that, and then just let the other stuff go. So starting with writer's group is huge, getting it as clean as possible. Then you might want to send it out to beta readers. Beta readers are people that do not know you. So they don't care if they hurt your feelings or not. They're there to say, and a beta reader only really reads in their genre. And I'm a beta reader using some Facebook groups. So people will send me their stuff and I'll look at it and go, oh man, this isn't even, you're not ready, but I would love to but I'm brutally honest that way, but I say it this way. But it's important for them to hear that, because it's horrible for them to have it put out on Amazon and then have it be a total flop. I mean, that's worse. When they'd rather be told up front where they have a chance to fix it.
And there's like, I don't know if Tim, you've ever heard this story, but there was a word that I used in Anomaly, and I gave it to who I would have called beta users, but really it sounds like that was more of this group of individuals, because I gave early copies to people and said, hey, read this. And so I used the word glass ceiling in something in my book, and someone who read it said, hey, I understand what you're saying in this, but I don't know that the average user will. I recommend you use this different word. And I was very, her name was Lavinia. I was very thankful for her with that, Lavinia Haskins. And I think that's her last name. And I was very thankful for her to tell me that, because I just wrote what I understood that word to mean in that kind of very specific setting. And she's like, yeah, but as a white male, people are going to look at you differently in that. And so I was talking about like how like I was hitting like a glass ceiling or something like that. And I was very thankful for that, because I would have just published it and been there. And so she said, hey, here's this word. I understand what you're saying because I know you, but I think the average user won't. Here's a couple of words that I think that you can use instead, or describe the story differently. And look, it probably helped me not have to, go on CNN and have to talk it through with people. There's
a whole different, there are a bunch of different kind of editors, just like there are a bunch of different types of publishers. And there's one called a sensitivity editor.
Oh, okay.
And that's the kind of stuff that they specifically look for. And if you're a white man writing about something in the Black world, you would have African-American readers read it to make sure you're not saying something wrong that's going to make people mad.
Got it. Well, in my case, I wasn't doing that, but I've never heard of the sensitivity editor.
Yep.
That's really interesting. It's very strong, powerful. And I think more people should do that, just so that they make sure that. And
that goes with if you have a handicapped character.
Sure. Yeah.
Anything like that.
I mean, even something as like, not silly, but as to me, I just wrote it because that's how I saw this thing. I was like, I've hit the glass ceiling in the workforce. I was over it. And I guess other people, from a sensitivity standpoint, would read that differently. And I think that can be more powerful. And I think more people need to at least think about addressing those type of things, whether or not they do it or not. That's up to them. But I definitely think it's powerful to have different diversities of people look at that. And I know when I gave out my book, I gave it to like every single diversity possible that I thought
That's good.
could have been reading it, because I wanted that type of feedback. And so I'm fine. Like when Chris gave me the first real edit back of the book, it was just 120 pages of red ink. And I was like, thank you, buddy. I appreciate that.
Well, at least you had somebody that could give you some good, solid feedback, which is always important.
I mean, that's what you pay people for, right? That's what you have this for. Like, they make it better, right? I mean, it's a team, right? Writing a book is never just about one person. It's about a bunch of people. And I'm a big believer in teams. I'm a big believer that even if you are a solo founder of a business, you still have a plethora of people on your team, and you should look at it like that, because there's a lot of people that are going to bat for you. Maybe not every day in the same specifics that you are, but there's a bunch of people that want to see you grow. And I think you have to look at it. Most things in life are surrounded by teams, and the people who don't grasp that concept, I think, are the ones who fail miserably.
I have a networking group, the Williamsburg Business Network, that we get together, and we were just talking about it this morning. We're small, and as a matter of fact, we're going to talk to Startwheel, but we're a group that is more about accountability and helping each other than just networking. It's not just passing leads like a BNI. It is truly about, Dawn, you said you were going to do this many things this week. Did you do that? You know, and somebody that you can bounce ideas off of. And you're right, Zach, it is so important to have a team that can help you with those things.
Yep.
Dawn, you said you were going to drink 1 glass of wine tonight. Did you do it?
Only 1 glass of wine.
Hey, that's a big glass. We can't see the depth of that wine behind you, but it does look like it's a 2-glass bottle.
Still.
Heavy pour.
Heavy pour. Is there anything we haven't talked about that you want to talk about, Dawn?
I think we've hit on a lot of different things. I would love to talk to anybody that is interested in getting their book out, getting their story, whether it's nonfiction or fiction. I don't do poetry very much, but I do know people that do poetry. So I will pass people on to the right place for those kind of things. But no matter what stage you're in, if you want to check out the Road to Publishing, this will help you figure stuff out. I also have an interview linked to the top of my website where I go into a lot more detail about the book. So they can see what I'm like watching this video a couple different times if they need to take notes. And then feel free to reach out to me. I'm very easy to get a hold of.
Sweet. Go to head to bluedragonpublishing.com to do all of those things. Tim, thoughts?
I appreciate your time, Don. A lot of insight shared. You make me feel the pressure that I need to join the author club.
I think you should consider that.
Yeah.
I'm sure you have notes somewhere.
I do. I have lots of notes.
Hey, if you wait long enough, Tim, someone will be able to extrapolate the things that you think on your runs and turn that into a book.
I've solved a lot of the world's problems on my runs.
Just wait 3 more years.
Just share.
Don, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for being with us today. Tim, always good to see you. And we will see you guys on the next show. Until then, peace and pancakes. Pumpkin spice pancakes.